Thanks, Stuart. Amen, brother. We've got some time for some questions, and Rod's got a microphone up there so we can engage in some conversation around some of the issues that Stuart's touched on. So who'd like to go first?
You mentioned slavery. Yes. Did you mean here in Australia or elsewhere in the world?
No, when I mentioned slavery, I was actually referring to back in the 1st century. So I wasn't referring to slavery, modern day slavery, especially modern day sex slavery, which is a phenomenon right throughout the West and we need to be incredibly watchful for. Now, I was using it more as an example of the difference in cultures from the 1st century to the 21st century.
But you do realise we still have slavery, which
absolutely.
Has nothing to do with sex either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question.
Stuart, as a absolutely committed sort of leader in the Catholic Church, how do you think we can start to change from that ability for renewal to actual renewal? How do you think we can not do more damage?
Yeah. Okay. That's a really, really big question. And I can't answer it in 5 minutes. I think there are 2 Catholic churches. I think there's Rome and the Curia, the official teachings, the magisterium, and I think there's the ordinary person in the local parish in our suburbs. And I think there's a disjunction quite often between what Catholics are taught and how Catholics experience their faith. I think there are gay people throughout Catholic parishes all through Australia who are welcomed and accepted and loved and are part of the ministry of the Church and do well. I guess it's going to be up to Catholics themselves to agitate for their leadership, and I guess we're talking about the bishops, to get to the heart of these matters in the relative bishops' conferences around the world and to start these conversations. Can I give you a quote from my partner, Chris? Chris said to me a couple of months ago, oh, I know what it was just at the election of the new Pope. Chris said, if I could give the Catholic Church one gift now, it would be the gift of impatience. The gift of impatience. Yeah. I think there's something in that. I think there's really something in that, where Catholic people themselves start to, and I don't mean rise up in, revolution and insurrection, but I mean to raise their voices and start to have their voices heard, so that the hierarchy are part of that conversation and are listening. All right, I'm incredibly encouraged that we've got the bishop here tonight. Because I said, there's lots of Catholic bishops probably across Australia who wouldn't come tonight. All right, so the fact that Bishop Bill has probably looked at my book and come along tonight is a very, very wonderful thing, and I would hope that his voice and people like him, other bishops like him, can raise their voice and talk about these issues. Gay people, we are not intrinsically disordered. We are not inclined to moral evil. I do not have a rejection of God and a repudiation of God by my life. On the contrary, I have a history very, very much like Greg's, all the way through. And so I want to be valued and validated as part of the church if I'm part of a local congregation. I think local Catholics themselves have to speak. I want them to speak
Thank you for your words giving help to our words to speak. So thanks,
Thank you.
Stuart.
Yeah, I do appreciate it. Thank you. There's one over here.
Thank you.
I go to a Christian school. I'm in Year 12, so I'm doing my last year of HSC. Especially in society and culture, it comes up, like talking about being gay, and it's quite, they talk about it. My teacher talks about it in a way where it's like there needs to be a cure sort of thing, and I get upset about it. But what would you say? How should I approach that? Should I say something? Like, what would you do?
Okay, thank you very much, Amelia, for asking that question. Look, I used to teach in a Christian school. So I know the ethos back to front, and I know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. What I think is not acceptable now, from my point of view as an out gay man and a psychologist who has studied this stuff, is it's not okay for anybody at all, schools, churches, or anybody else in society, to tell us that we are sick or ill and that we need to be cured. All right? It is 30 years this year, in fact next month I think, that the American Psychiatric Association removed homosexuality from its Bible, or its book, its huge Bible of mental disorders. It's 30 years, the DSM. All right? Amelia, I would suggest that you talk to the teacher. And look, I would say this to any young person. I think it's good to put your hand up and speak up and say what you want to say in these issues. But I also say be careful and make sure you do it in a context where nobody's going to, throw missiles at you either. Sometimes kids can be cruel, as you know. So you've got to kind of weigh it up a little bit. But, even talking to the teacher, you can say so. Or you can recommend them my book. They'll love that.
Remembering back to my teens and my experiences in high school, I found within my community many young Catholics that were quite sympathetic to the cause of our GLBT brothers and sisters. But because, as statistics have proven, the average Catholic is very sympathetic, but our hierarchy is still very much against, many of us held back in fear of engaging in an open dialogue with our GLTB brethren and sisters. So what advice would you give to young Catholics or older Catholics that would like to engage in a dialogue with our GLBT brethren and sisters without causing them to feel that we might be disingenuous?
Okay. Again, I think the safety issue is important. Thanks for the question, Damien. I encourage people to speak up. I really do encourage people to speak up. I think silence, the time for silence is over. We need to stop not talking about this. Christians need to understand that gay people exist, that we are here. As I said at the beginning, it's about 30 years behind the times. So speaking up, I think, is absolutely essential, but I also know that people need to do it in a safe context where they're not going to be pummeled by either church dogma and a real sort of unloving tone, or evangelical fundamentalists, for example, just hurling Bible verses. And, I've had every verse hurled at me now, under the sun. But, and it's okay for me, I'm a big boy, I can look after myself. But young people need to be careful that they're supported. I would also suggest too that, I guess, for young Catholics, they probably know which of the priests they can talk to and which they can't. There are probably priests who, just by the way they present their own ministry, perhaps sound more open to talking about these issues. and it's probably a wise thing to talk to priests such as those. Yeah.
And do you feel that an open and empathic communication would allow the GLBT community to feel safe with us in spite of the Curia?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Rod started tonight by welcoming everybody. You know, the gay people have felt so unwelcomed by the church. All we've ever felt is being judged and found wanting. And that needs to stop. You know, we are, you know, if you're a believer in God here tonight, we believe we're God's children. Well, gay people are God's children just as much as straight people are. All right. So, yeah, we need to be welcomed. We need to be welcomed. I think there's a question over there too.
Yeah, thanks. It's probably more of a comment than a question. I just wanted to say thank you to you, Stuart, for writing the book. And I haven't read it yet. I've bought a copy tonight. But it was the inception for so many things for me, and I wasn't aware at the time. I read that article in the Newcastle Herald, and I think it was probably a year and a half or so ago, with private interest. It was very private at that point. I thought to myself, I'd love to meet this guy, but couldn't ever conceive of that ever happening. One thing led to another, and it was actually through the journalist who wrote that story that I had the opportunity to have several conversations with yourself, as you know. I just think it's so important what each of you have said tonight. I feel bear with me, I'll get it out.
You're right.
Privileged. Yeah. Privileged, and privileged that my kids have heard you speak, each of you.
Yeah.
It's just fantastic, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Cordelia. I do appreciate that. Cordelia Birchall is the Deputy Mayor of Cessnock. And yeah, I'm very thankful that you came tonight.
Can I actually finish now that I could take a breath and get over that hump? 6 months ago, I couldn't have sat here or said any of these things, or even have been privileged, I suppose, to have been able to speak out. And I mean, as you're well aware, and some of you may know, there has been opportunity for me to speak out and speak up for gay people locally, and I attribute that absolutely back to you. I know where that comes from. You know, it was a series of coincidence that led me to meet you in the first place, but I just want to express how thankful I am for that and how important it is, and now I'll go on and read your book and probably buy copies for all of my family and those sorts of things too. So thank you,
Thanks,
you, and thank you
Cordelia.
to each of the people who've spoken tonight. It was really eloquent. I think really, really important stuff has been said.
Thank you.
I did take the opportunity this afternoon to do some chalk work on the front of the church entrance. But no one from the council turned up to arrest me. I thought it would have been a great photo opportunity, but it was missed. So.
Yeah, fantastic.
Maybe one more question.
Yeah, perhaps just one more question and then we'll wrap up. There's one over here. Yeah? Okay.
Hi. I'd just like to make a comment. I can sympathise with where you're coming from, talking about the way gays have been treated. But what comes to mind is, like when you look in the history of the church in Australia, we saw like the way Aborigines were treated years ago. And I thought, what was said about the Aborigines back then was similar to what's said about about gays now, right? And people with like mental illnesses often also get ostracised and marginalised in the same way. Yeah. Let's go one step back and think, why have we got this fear of anything that's different?
The forces of conservatism propel us to fearing anything that's different. And we just have to be vigilant. We are an incredibly diverse creation. The whole world is. You've only got to look at nature, and so are we as human beings. We're all different. It takes all different types, and there are lots and lots and lots of different types of people. We're not all cookie-cutter clones. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for all the intelligence and all the life experience that you brought to bear in writing this important book. Let me commend it to you as a good read, and then also as a reference book, as I've come back to it many times. It has a great depth and relevance, and it would be worthwhile. We've got just a few copies left. They're usually sold for 30. You've got 10 copies, 9 copies left, 8 copies left, so just counting. So normally sells for $30, and we're selling it tonight for $25. And there's a young lady down the front here who needs a copy to give her teacher, so if you'd like to purchase her a copy, that would be good. So thank you for coming along tonight. Sure, and Stuart will be happy to wander up the back there, and if you'd like to get his signature, he'd be happy to do that. If you'd like to go on the mailing list for future events, there's a piece of paper at the door. And if you'd like to throw in a few dollars for the glass of wine and supper, there's a bowl up there. We don't usually serve wine here. It's usually grape juice. So consider yourselves blessed and all. I can turn the wine to water if you like. Can't do it the other way around. Stu and I in conversation about how to follow up this seminar, and through a fortuitous connection of circumstances, it's a great pleasure to announce that Bishop Gene Robinson will be speaking here in a month's time on Thursday the 28th of May. Bishop Gene Robinson was the first out gay man to be elected as a bishop in the Episcopal Church in the United States, with great media attention around the world, and he's here on a speaking tour, and we've been able to get him to come to Newcastle on that particular night, and there are sheets of information there. You can take one and please pass it on. There will be a charge that night, as we need to cover his costs from the United States, so please I commend that to you. And finally, in many ways, Stuart, you've invited us to greet the stranger and to greet the shadow in us all, to cross the boundaries of hospitality. So may the peace of God be with you. Please share the peace amongst this gathering tonight. So greet a stranger, you get a point.